Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands with Kelly Bennett Podcast. I have a very special guest this week, someone who I'm always chatting with on social. I love her content, her aesthetic, all the work that she's up to, and I just deeply admire her. Claire Hueg, I'm so happy you're here.
I am so excited to be here. I love chatting with you, so it's exciting to do it here.
Yes, absolutely. So, Claire is the founder of Persephone Planet, that is a company that's building online communities for indie brands. And Claire, I would love to hear your story of how you started this brand.
Yeah, absolutely. So because it is like a services based freelancing business, like my brand story is my story. Like they're one
Yes.
and the same for sure. Um, I grew up on the internet, right? Like
Mhm.
I was in high school in the 20 teens. Like I after school was like reblogging Doctor Who memes on Tumblr. Like that's where I
Yes.
grew up. And it was such a positive space for me. I loved the community element of being on the internet. I grew up in a really small rural town. There was like a really limited way to be. And I think a lot of my classmates, now talking to them in adulthood, struggled with it as much as I did. But at the time, it felt really lonely for all of us. And a lot of us went to the internet to find the support for those specific communities. And so for me, it was like some of the like nerdy stuff, right? Like I said, Doctor Who, um, or like Harry Potter. I was big in like the like nerd Tumblr
Love it.
blog scene. But even like I'm 6'2", and there was a now defunct Instagram account, Tall Girl Problems, right? That was like posting memes about what it was like to be tall. And I think in a lot of ways that really changed my body image, and that gave me a sense of community to connect with other people who felt like too tall to be pretty, right? And so I always loved the internet. And now I fast forward, I'm out of college. I'm talking with people, going to work in social media. Users are like caught in doom scrolling. Social media managers are burnt out. Brands list the algorithm as public enemy number one. Like everyone hates social media for the most part. And it made me really sad as I was going to work in social that this content churn and like
Mm.
algorithmic content was depressing a lot of people. And we see really like clear impacts of how social media can disrupt our sleep, it can promote loneliness, but it can also promote all of the connection that I referenced earlier that I found when I was this lonely teen, like looking for my people. And so I really want to reframe social media management instead of it being like well, we have to be here feeling for brands. I want to curate like a really intentional digital footprint for them where they can find their people, right? Their dream customer is in a community on the internet, is looking for their person. And if brands can be an authentic part of that community, that goes a long way in finding your like true fans for your growing brand.
Okay, I love every single thing that you just said. And and something that struck me right when I found you on Instagram, and I don't even know like how that even happened, but you never know how like you find
Yeah.
people on social. That really struck me because I was like, I love how you frame that you build communities for indie brands versus I offer social media management, which you know, is I've been a social media manager myself, managing 8+ accounts at the same time and very active accounts, and it's a lot of work. And so the
Mm-hmm.
way that you framed it and really positioning it as I help indie brands build community to me brings it back to the human element and why there's a huge positive impact of being online is because you do have that community. So I really love and admire how you put that together.
Thank you, Kelly. And
You're
I think
welcome.
what really struck me working in social media is I for a long time did say, I'm a social media management freelancer. And I would get on discovery calls and I would ask these brands, so what is your goal in us working together? And they would say, our goal is to be on Instagram, to be on TikTok, and to be on Twitter. TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter are tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? But to say our goal is to be there is really ineffective. You don't have to be anywhere, right? Like, a goal to me is we want to connect with our target customers on a platform that feels really natural for them, right? Like the same way that if we were looking at this in person, if all of your favorite people were going to a karaoke bar every Thursday night, you would start hanging out there so you could befriend them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's a real relationship that we're trying to build here. And so if all of your dream customers are on TikTok, yeah, you should be on TikTok, but not that's not the goal. The goal isn't to be on TikTok. The goal is to connect with your dream customers. And so
Yes.
I really reframed
Big
it to this
yes.
online community because I think that helps these founders and small startup teams understand that what we're doing isn't managing social media. We're connecting with people, and social media is the tool that we're using to do that.
Amen. I love everything you just said. And it's something that I've been personally very passionate about of my approach to social media and creating content, really leaning into storytelling and community building. I graduated college when you were in high school, as far as like that time of like the early 2010s internet. So I remember the conversations of brands saying like, the first platform that brands were going on was Twitter at that time. And it was like, ooh, we're going to go on Twitter. What do we say? And that's what I was working on, getting these huge brands on Twitter. And I remember them being like, is social media going to be a thing? What the hell is this? And cutting to now, it's like, I know I need to be here, but I'm burnt out by it. So I really love how you've taken it back to the roots and really helping founders build it in a really positive way from the beginning. So I
Yeah.
again, just like I was really hot on that back then, and like I'm really happy to hear the conversation coming back to that, because I feel like it went so far into aesthetics and everything has to be perfectly curated and like nitpicked, and like every single thing that you shared was like had to be perfect, and it's like of course that's not sustainable because that's not human, right? So I
Mhm.
really love how you're doing that with brands right from the beginning. So let me ask you this: how are those conversations going after you personally made that shift in your own brand, and how you've been reframing conversations? How are founders and startup teams understanding that, resonating with it? Walk me through that. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think at first there's some hesitation because, of course, when I'm working with small teams, people want the most bang for their buck, right? So when I
Right.
say, hey, I'm not going to turn out a million pieces of content and I'm not going to be online 24/7, they're like, well, wait, don't we want someone who's doing that? But actually, once we get into it, and I point out that it's relationship building, and the same way that it could be damaging for a friendship to have that friend who's texting you at all hours of the day and expecting an immediate response. Like, we don't want to burn out your followers and your community by constantly barraging them with lazy content, right? It's about being intentional. It's about thinking before we're speaking on these platforms. And so that it's actually a more effective strategy. They don't have tons of content to review from me. I'm not constantly knocking down their door saying, hey, we got to get this up right this second. It's a thoughtful and intentional relationship. And so that actually feels much more sustainable for a founder
Mm.
team than needing to be on 17 different social media sites at once. And so people are actually really in love with this approach once we work on it together. And I've actually started offering content coaching calls now. Where people who are interested in this approach can work with me in like a 1 hour hands-on, like tactical session where we're going through their social together to start teaching these skills to turn off that piece of your brain that says, everything needs to be perfect constantly. I need to be responding to messages constantly in order to be successful, and reframing that into a more productive and more efficient social media strategy. And so people are really excited to work on this, whether it's someone who's DIYing their social and they just want my guidance in how to unlearn some of those rules we've learned, or if they're going to me for more of like a full scope management project.
I love that. And I like how you are teaching it and also doing it. And that's a really nice mix also just for your own business too, to be able to diversify your offerings of like, I'll teach you how to do it and or I will do it for you and guide you through the process as I'm doing it. So I
Yeah.
thought I saw that in your social that you offer both and I was like, "Oh, that's a really clever way of breaking it down." And for you to build that authority as this thought leader with this particular differentiator for social also is a great way for you to build your brand and business. So I love that.
Thanks. I really appreciate you saying that. It kind of got to a point where my schedule was packed to the gills. I couldn't have taken on any additional work. Just because when you're working with a founder team, people are on a scrappier budget.
Yep.
And so I either had to divorce from the people I really love working with, right? Saying, sorry, I'm going to go chase down bigger ticket clients, or come up with an offering that really worked for both of us, where I could keep growing Persephone Planet and keep supporting these like small founder teams that I truly love working with. And so for a lot of people who are on that small budget, actually that thought leadership and coaching is the piece they need to unlock in order to get on social, right? Because it feels so burnt out and overwhelming. And it's like, I can't understand the algorithm and all of these like negative pieces to social. So many founders I talk to are like, I don't want to touch it. And then once we dig into it and understand how they can use it as a free resource to basically sit in a session with their closest customers, like then they're excited about it and they can go out and do it on their own. And so I really have always set strong criteria for who I'm working with. And as I've made this switch from I'm a social media manager to I'm building these intentional online communities, I I intuitively know right away if a brand is someone I want to be working with. And if they're looking for that 24/7 always on churning out content, that's not my strength. And so they're better off going to someone else. And I respect if that's what they are choosing, but I just want to make sure they understand there is another option before they jump into
Totally.
it.
And I feel like there's different camps of like people who get into social media management and they're more so into, say, producing video content. And there's others who are just constantly churning out content. And then there's others who are more into like the data and the engagement rates. And then there's people who are really into the community aspect. And none of them are better or worse than each other. I think it's a good mix of like having awareness of what works for a certain brand at certain times. But I
Yeah,
really like how you differentiated yourself in the social media space for the community aspect, which I think, again, there's going to be a pendulum shift of like, actually, it's not just focusing on how many followers, it's genuine engagement and how we could build community
mhm,
around this. I really feel it swinging that way back again. So I love how
totally.
you connected those dots.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And like the final piece to it really is that a lot of my work background is in customer experience and customer service. I've been on helplines. I've worked like retail jobs where I'm pulling pieces for people to try in the fitting room. And so I like from my like first job in high school have always loved the customer journey and the customer relationship. And so translating that onto social for me, it's still all about the customer and all about the community.
I love that so much. I'm so excited that we're getting this captured on the podcast because I will be sending this out to so many people being like, listen to Claire. Don't stress. Listen to this podcast episode because this is such great information and such great reminders, especially for an emerging brand founder who's wearing all the hats and figuring out all the things that they need to be doing. And social media just becomes this huge lift, right? And they're like, I don't know if
Totally.
I could do this. So I think your approach also is making it feel more tangible, of like a lower lift, like about community, like you could have some contacts of the power of community, and we're just doing that for your brand online and offline, like
Mhm.
they both could work together. What has been one of the best ways that you've been growing your brand, as far as like attracting these indie brands, attracting brands that want community? What has been something that has been helpful for you to do that?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting in that I'm building my brand on two levels, right? Like I'm building Persephone Planet, and then I'm also doing this client work where I'm building their brand on their behalf.
Okay.
And so, pretty early on in my freelancing career, I heard the advice that you should always be your first client, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I try to really invest my fresh energy into modeling what I think social media can be on my own accounts. And that can be tough because I'm paying $0 for those services. And so to say, I'm going to take the energy from that instead of putting it towards a paying external client, it's tough. But at the end of the day, I'm the best portfolio case study I could offer, right? When people are engaging with me on my site and on my Instagram, like they're seeing what type of community I can build for them. So I want that community to be really vibrant. And so I feel like my Instagram followers are kind of like what I would call a virtual Rolodex of, instead of trying to grow it to these really high numbers, it's intentionally inviting people in to follow, right? It's these one-on-one connections of like you and
Mm-hmm.
I would consider friends, and we've never once sat down in person and had like a drink together or grabbed
Right.
coffee. Like it's a friendship that was fostered through a social media app. And so if every follower I add to my Instagram is someone who's doing something really cool, who has a great connection to my brand, who's gonna be an exciting networking opportunity, that's the community I want on my Instagram. I don't want 20,000 followers that I bought on a sketchy
Oh,
site. Like I want the people who would go to bat for me. And so that's really how I'm approaching my social media, right? It's the case study for people to go to. And then because I'm so community focused, I'm always making time for like coffee chats and co-working sessions, like really prioritizing personal connections, and then taking on small scale pro bono work where I can, to really continue to emphasize that I'm here for the community. I care about sustainability and independent brands. And so I'm working with Minnesota Fashion Week, which is an entirely like volunteer based organization here in the Twin Cities. I've worked with nonprofits to help them get their social media up off the ground and running. And all of that, again, is to really showcase those differentiators that I'm not a hustle and grind person. This is going to be a slow, sustainable, and conscious investment in your business when you work with me.
I love that so much. And I love how you have incorporated sustainability in social media. And it's something that I had a call with a founder last week, and she was really passionate about building a brand around sustainable living. And she had all these ideas and all these things. And I said, but what type of business are you building for yourself? Because you're saying a lot of stuff, which is great, but you also have to think of the sustainability of actually running this business. And she
Mhm.
was like, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, you, right? Like, we don't want to burn out people who are so mission driven and doing all these cool things for the planet and people, right? Like, you have to be
Mhm.
intentional with how you're actually building it and what's the business model around it. So I really love how you integrated those two things because they very much work together.
Mhm.
Love that.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times when we have this strong mission focus, uh, we want to couple it with this really hard drive and work ethic. But if you look at some people who are in more stressful fields, there's a lot of resources that exist to support them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I live with my partner, Connor, who works in a more conventional, like corporate 9 to 5. And when he has a really intense week or a really intense quarter, or he has to do some like professional exams, when he's preparing for those things, there's study resources, there's mentorship programs, there's bonuses and recognition programs. And as a founder, you don't have all of those things. Like it takes
Right.
so many support people to keep someone operating at that super intense level. And so when it's just you have to factor in that you're also your support person. Like you are running a race of one, and there's people there to cheer you on, but you can't run yourself into the ground because there's not going to be people there to like pick you back up and dust you off. You pick yourself back up. And so in my
Yes.
entrepreneurship journey and in how I approach social media, I try to really distance myself from those like super intense sprints. Like sometimes it's necessary to make it happen, but you always have to bake in, what am I going to do if I get sick? What am I going to do if I just need a slow day? And like keeping room in my schedule to be a real human being with the understanding that I don't have the power of a million men behind me to like pump me full of energy if I burn myself out.
That's a really great point as far as when you do have a corporate job that you do have ideally and say most cases have more support in there for keeping up that momentum of such a higher pace. And I've also been on the end of I've been an entrepreneur now for almost 15 years, which it's wild that like
Love. Yeah.
I've been at it a minute. And so I've definitely have had more times than not when I did burn myself out. And I remember one time I was a partner and creative director and I ran all events, marketing, social, like all the things for a restaurant. I was a partner of it, super passionate about it, mission based, all the things. But I decided to host 21 events for 21 days to kick off the month of January. And I was doing email, social, curation, hosting. By the 21st day, I was literally in bed and I couldn't even move. I was like so zapped
Mhm.
that I had to send my girlfriend at the time to the restaurant. I'm like, go with my phone and live stream on Instagram the event. Like I was telling her how to like capture the content because I was so zapped. So this time around in my
Mhm.
business, I've been in business now 2 years in this new reiteration of with Kelly Bennett and how I have my emerging brand incubator and all that good stuff. I'm like, I'm not doing that again. I'm not. So one of the
Yeah.
biggest things I did this time around was go to therapy, create better boundaries, have more of a container with how I work with people. And I'm really starting to feel that impact of like my business now feels fulfilling and sustainable. And even though it's getting busier and growing, like it feels scalable. I have processes. So there's definitely an ROI on doing
Mhm.
things with more intention and making it sustainable for you as the founder so that you can consistently show up for the community you're cultivating.
Totally. Even like with both of us working from home, sometimes
Right.
I want to DoorDash for lunch. And instead of viewing that as a failure, I say to Connor, like, hey, what do you want from Chipotle? My boss is buying us lunch today, right? Because I'm the boss and I'm
That's really
choosing to buy
sweet.
lunch for the office. And that's a morale booster when you're working in an office setting. But when it's you alone, instead of framing it as a failure, frame it as a morale booster for
Claire,
you.
that is so cute. I love that so much. Like, hey, my boss is buying us lunch. I love that so much.
Yeah, like think about those like early days before your entrepreneurship journey. When on a Friday when you came in and there were donuts in the office, you're like, "Oh, this is going to be a good
It's going to
day."
be a good
How
day.
how often do you walk into your kitchen and there's like a box of donuts waiting for you? Never, unless you're the one putting them there. So you
Right.
have to keep doing those things for yourself that an HR or like a culture team or a manager would be doing if they were invested in employee well-being, because like you have to be invested in your own employee well-being.
I love that so much. And that brings me to my question of what would be a piece of advice you would share with a founder of an emerging brand?
Okay, so this actually comes from my mom. When I
Love
was in
that.
college, I wanted to study sustainability, and that is what I ended up getting my degree in, with the intention to work with sustainability entrepreneurs in like developing sustainable businesses. And so when I was trying to pick this, there was a lot of like, what are you doing? That's not like accounting or marketing or whatever. It's like a clear path. When I was
Right.
picking sustainability, there was a bit of, hey, are you sure?
Yeah.
And so my mom actually gave me this advice. She said, choose whatever you're the second most passionate about and make that your career. I think for entrepreneurs,
Mm.
there's sometimes this message that you have to have a burning passion and give it everything you've got, or you're going to fail, right? I like remember watching America's Next Top Model, and it's like, if you're not living and breathing modeling, like you're going home.
Yeah.
And I actually think that sets us up to fail, because you have nothing to go to then that is not your work, right? When you are talking about, I have boundaries, I'm going to therapy, I'm being really intentional, you need to have something you care about more than your company and something that you hold precious separate from what you're building. And so
Mhm.
like I made really strategic positioning decisions where like my brand business name LLC, it's Persephone Planet, it's not Claire Hueg, because I needed that
Boundary.
separation for myself of like, when am I Claire the boss and when am I Claire the person?
Mhm.
Right? I just recently did like a brand color workshop, and they asked, like, you said your favorite color is one thing, but your brand colors are another. I made my brand colors my second favorite colors, because my home is decorated in my favorite colors. My closet's in my favorite colors, right? Like, keep things that are sacred to you. This is especially true with social media. You don't have to post everything, right? Choose what's sacred to you, what's number one passion, and keep that as a place to restore. And then take the second biggest passion and make that your career. And I think that's really how you build a sustainable brand, by choosing that one thing that matters more to you than the work you're doing, so that you can find solace there when work is stressing you out.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. I've never heard it framed that way, but it totally makes sense. I mean, I will say I do live, breathe, and sleep like emerging brands. I'm not going to lie. However, I've really done some inner work to allow myself to enjoy. I would say my number one is honestly living in New York City, going to
Mm-hmm.
restaurants, going to shops, just walking around, honestly, is like my biggest love. That like, I don't necessarily need to be in New York City in order to do my job because everything's online,
Yeah,
but just being here and like just living in it, I'm like, this makes me really happy. Like, I love what I do,
mm-hmm.
but I also now have this outlet that I could just walk down the street and be really happy. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with anything in particular for my job.
Totally.
So
And
I,
like
I
for
like how
me,
she said that.
yeah, for me, it's like being in nature, right? Like I love going on a long walk. And like if I were branding myself in a way where nature was like really connected to my work, I couldn't go for my morning walk, do my deep breathing, get grounded, because I'd be looking around and thinking, how do I monetize this? How do I add this into my brand? How do I make this work for my business? And you need to have those things that just belong to you, the individual, because that then floats
Yeah,
all
no,
of
I
the
like
energy you
this.
need to build your brand.
This was good advice from your mom. I really,
Yeah.
really like this advice. This will be a good nugget also to send to clients, be like, listen to Claire's mom. Okay.
Yes.
Listen to
Yes.
Claire's mom. This is really good advice. And so on this note, because you really have me so stoked about building community and being intentional and making things sustainable, how can a founder work with you, either doing that consulting call of teaching them your methodology of online community building or working with you more so on the management of their community?
Totally. So I am super excited to connect with all of the like emerging brands and founders you work
Yes,
with. I feel like every single person you share is incredible.
that
And
makes
so
me
please
happy.
come connect with me.
Yes,
As I said, I'm always like experimenting with what community building looks like on my own Instagram. So a really easy way to engage is to follow me at Persephone Planet on Instagram. That is my main social presence. I'm also in August, in honor of my birthday, launching a Substack that will dive deeper into some of these topics.
ooh,
And I am still accepting new creators and brands to work with in my content coaching sessions. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper into this, I'd love to get on a call with you and really tactically work through what we can do to develop your social media in a
love that.
sustainable, community focused way.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing your story and your enthusiasm and passion and authenticity. I always get a good vibe and I always am happy when I see your post pop up. So, this podcast episode was just such a treat to talk with you more. And I just really appreciate everything you shared today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Your podcast has been such a wealth of knowledge for me as I'm building my brand. And so it's been my pleasure to pay it forward by sharing any nuggets of wisdom I can contribute to the collective as we're all
Love
like
that.
growing in this together.
That makes me really happy. Thank you for saying that. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Go follow Claire, connect, build community, and I'll see everyone on the next episode. Bye.